slows down as the road simply disappears into a mountain. Inside the tunnel, everything goes dark. No sunlight. No horizon. Just rock. And silence. And then, somewhere beneath the ocean, you realize something strange. You are driving under the sea. Above you is nothing but thousands of meters of water. And yet, people here treat this like a normal commute. This is the Faroe Islands. A place where 50,000 people live at what feels like the edge of the world. But the deeper question is not where they live. It's why they stay. The engine hums softly as the car rolls forward into the mountains. Outside the windshield, the landscape is already starting to feel unreal. Cliffs rise like giant walls carved by something ancient and patient. The sky hangs low, almost touching the earth. And somewhere ahead, the road simply disappears. There is no warning sign that prepares you for it. No dramatic announcement. Just a tunnel opening in the side of a mountain, swallowing the road whole. You slow down without thinking. Because something about this place makes you instinctively aware that you are no longer in control. You enter the tunnel, and the world outside vanishes. No sunlight, no horizon, only darkness stretching forward like it has no end. The sound changes too. The tires no longer touch open air and freedom. Now they echo against stone, deep, hollow, enclosed. And then, after a long descent, something strange happens. The tunnel doesn't feel like it's going through a mountain anymore. It feels like it's going down into the earth itself. And then, even deeper. Under the ocean. Above you now is not rock, not land, but thousands of meters of cold, moving water. And yet inside this tunnel, life continues as if nothing extraordinary is happening. A radio plays softly in another car. Someone is driving home from work. Someone else is thinking about what to cook for dinner. And that contrast is where the Faroe Islands begin to reveal their true nature. This is the Hidden Nations TV. A place suspended between land and sea, isolation and connection, silence and survival. Most people imagine remote living as something simple, empty, cut off. But the truth here is far more complex, because nothing about life here is truly disconnected. It is just re-engineered. The tunnel tunnel eventually rises again. Light slowly returns at the end of the darkness, and suddenly you emerge into a completely different world. Green valleys unfold like something impossible. Waterfalls fall directly from cliffs into the sea below. Tiny houses sit scattered across the landscape like they were placed there by careful intention rather than chance. Until you realize you have just driven under the ocean. And it feels normal. That might be the most unsettling part. Not the tunnel itself, but how quickly the impossible becomes ordinary here. Because in the Faroe Islands, extraordinary geography is not a tourist attraction. It is infrastructure, it is daily life. It is how people go to work, visit family, and move between islands without thinking twice about what lies above or below them. But even after you adjust to the tunnels, something else begins to stand out. Silence. Not the absence of sound, but a presence of it. A heavy, living quiet that sits between everything. You notice it when you stop the car, when you step outside, when the wind briefly pauses, and suddenly the entire world feels like it is holding its breath. There are no distractions here in the way most people understand them. No endless traffic noise, no crowded streets competing for attention, just space. And in that space, your thoughts start to feel louder than the world around you. It is in this silence that the islands begin to feel less like a destination and more like a question. Why would people choose to live in a place like this? Why build homes where the weather can change in minutes? Why stay where the ocean feels so close it could rewrite the land at any moment? As the road continues forward, sheep appear along the hillsides, standing on cliffs, walking across roads. There are more sheep than people here, and that imbalance says something deeper than statistics. It says this land was never meant to be dominated, only shared. And slowly, as the car moves deeper into the islands, another realization settles in. Everything is an adaptation. Everything is a response. A negotiation between human life and something far more powerful. Nature itself. If life here demands so much adaptation, what kind of people does it create? That question will not be answered immediately, because in this place, answers are never given quickly. They are revealed slowly, layer by layer, like the islands themselves. And as the car continues forward into the green horizon, the feeling grows stronger. You are only beginning to understand where you are. And what it means to live at the edge of the world. As you leave the tunnel behind, the world opens up again. But it does not feel like relief, it feels like exposure. The Faroe Islands don't greet you with warmth. They greet you with scale. Cliffs rise without warning, sharp and vertical, as if the earth was torn open rather than shaped over time. Waterfalls don't trickle here. They fall directly from the sky itself, cutting through mist and wind, before disappearing into the ocean below. And the ocean is always there, never far, never quiet, always watching the edges of the land like it remembers something the land has forgotten. This is the Hidden Nations TV in its purest form, not a destination, but a confrontation. Because here, nature does not sit politely in the background. It dominates everything. The wind is the first thing you truly notice, not as a feeling, but as a force that shapes how you move, how you speak, how you even think. It does not arrive gently. It arrives fully formed. You begin to understand quickly that nothing here is built to resist it. Everything is built to survive alongside it. Roofs are angled, walls are reinforced, houses are positioned carefully, as if they are constantly negotiating with the weather, because they are. And then there is the rain. Sometimes you cannot tell if it is raining or if the world is simply dissolving into mist. The sky and sea often blend into one continuous gray surface, erasing the boundary between above and below. In that moment, orientation becomes unreliable, distance becomes uncertain. And the islands feel less like a place you are standing on, and more like a place you are floating through. Yet life continues, unbothered in its rhythm. A fisherman drives past slowly. A small bus moves along a narrow road carved into the cliffside. How does life remain so ordinary in a place that feels so extreme? The answer is not spoken, it is lived. As you continue deeper, the land begins to feel more fragmented. The Faroe Islands are not one continuous piece of land. There are 18 main islands, separated by water, wind, and distance. Even now, that feeling hasn't disappeared completely. Moving between them still feels like entering different worlds. Bridges connect some, tunnels connect others, and ferries still remain essential for the rest. But what is most striking is not the technology. It is the acceptance. People here do not complain about distance. They plan around it. They live with it. They adapt to it. As the road climbs higher, the landscape changes again. Grass turns brighter green, cliffs become sharper, and suddenly sheep appear again. There are more sheep than people here, and this fact begins to feel symbolic. This is not a land dominated by humans. It is a shared ecosystem, and humans are only one part of it. As the car slows near a small village, something subtle begins to stand out. The quiet is different here. Not empty, not lifeless, but intentional. And in that silence, something else becomes noticeable. Closeness. When weather closes in, isolation is not theoretical. It is immediate. And that immediacy creates connection. But it also raises a deeper question. Does closeness create comfort, or does it create dependence? Everything carries both wonder and weight at the same time. And maybe that is why people here seem different. Not hardened, not distant, but aware. Aware of limits, aware of nature, aware of time. You are not just traveling through the Faroe Islands. You are beginning to understand a way of life that does not exist in most parts of the world anymore. A life where nature is not scenery, but structure. If your entire world depended on adapting to this kind of place, would you ever feel like you truly belong anywhere else? That question doesn't resolve. It simply follows you forward. Because in the Faroe Islands, every answer leads to another question. And the journey is only getting started. The road bends again, and suddenly the landscape breaks apart, not in chaos, but in separation. Water appears where land should continue. Mountains stand alone, like isolated monuments rising from the sea, and what looked like one continuous world now reveals itself as fragments. From above, it looks simple. Green islands scattered across a deep blue ocean. But from the ground, the experience is completely different, because each island feels like its own world, its own rhythm, its own silence, and crossing between them is never just movement, it is transition. You don't just change location here, you change atmosphere. As the car approaches the coastline, the wind intensifies again. It always does near the water, as if the ocean is exhaling directly onto the land. The waves below crash against black rock cliffs with a force that feels ancient, unchanging, relentless, and yet above all of it, life continues. Nothing here is built on the idea of control. Everything is built on the idea of timing. Fishermen don't fight the ocean, they wait for it, they read it, they respect it. And when the conditions align, they move, not with confidence in control, but with confidence in understanding. This relationship between people and nature defines everything here, even the roads reflect it. And then there are the tunnels, long, dim passages carved through rock and beneath water, connecting islands that once felt completely separate. Driving through them feels surreal. One moment you are surrounded by open sky. The next, you are deep beneath the earth, surrounded by pressure you cannot see but somehow feel. And then, without warning, light returns. This constant shift creates something unusual in daily life. A sense that distance is both real and irrelevant at the same time. Is home the island you live on, or the entire network of islands you move between? As you drive further inland, the landscape softens slightly. Small valleys open like hidden pockets of calm. Houses painted in deep reds, blacks, and earthy greens stand against the endless green backdrop, their roofs often covered in grass, blending them into the land itself. At a distance, it becomes hard to tell where nature ends and human life begins. Because here, survival is not about standing apart from the environment. It is about becoming part of it. Inside one of these villages, life moves quietly. Everyone is known. everyone is seen. Everyone is part of the same fragile ecosystem of community. But that closeness also creates a question that lingers beneath the surface. What happens when everyone knows you, and there is nowhere to disappear? As the road curves again, sheep appear across the hills. They roam freely, moving between cliffs and valleys as if ownership is irrelevant. Even the weather reinforces this idea. A clear sky can shift into fog so dense that entire mountains vanish within minutes. When that happens, life reorganizes itself around forces far greater than human intention. But instead of frustration, there is acceptance, because resistance here is exhausting. This place does not feel isolated because it is far away. It feels isolated because it demands awareness. Awareness of weather, awareness of timing, awareness of connection. Everything here is fragile in a way that is visible. Cliffs crumble, storms reshape coastlines, fog erases distance, and yet life persists, not in spite of it, but alongside it. As the car slows near another overlook, the ocean stretches endlessly into the horizon once again. Dark, moving, unfinished. If every path you take eventually leads back to the same forces of wind, water and land, then are you truly moving forward? Or simply learning how to exist inside something much larger than yourself? The answer does not arrive, but the question remains, following you, like the wind itself. The descent begins without ceremony, no dramatic warning. Just a narrow opening in the mountainside and a road that disappears into darkness. The moment you enter, the light behind you collapses into a fading dot. This is one of the subsea tunnels of the Faroe Islands, passages carved beneath the ocean itself. The deeper you go, the more reality shifts. Above you sits thousands of meters of Atlantic water pressing down with unimaginable weight. Yet inside, people casually drive to work, listening to music. The impossible here is completely normalized. There are no windows or reference points, only headlights cutting through the dark. Then, the tunnel begins to rise. And suddenly, light. You emerge back into the world, but it is not the same one you left. Each exit feels like stepping into a new chapter of a story written in cliffs, wind, and water. Scattered across the hillsides are homes topped with grass, blending so naturally into the terrain that you almost miss them. Nothing here feels accidental, even isolation feels designed. In the distance, sheep move across the vertical cliffs, unbothered. People share roads, silence, and a dependence on unpredictable weather. This dependence shapes a deep collective awareness. No one is truly independent from the environment or from each other. As the road curves along a cliffside, the ocean reappears. The waves strike the rocks with a consistent, endless force. Watching it, a realization settles in. The ocean is not moving toward anything. It is simply continuing. The roads, the tunnels, the villages, all match a rhythm far older than human presence. If nature does not rush, Why does human life elsewhere feel so compressed by time? Passing a small village, you notice the absolute lack of urgency. People walk slowly, conversations are unhurried. It is alignment, not laziness, a pace shaped by environment rather than expectation. Elsewhere, time pushes people. Here, they learn to walk alongside it. Gradually, the weather shifts. Thick fog rises from the valleys, swallowing the mountains. The world shrinks to what is immediately in front of you. Yet, driving continues confidently. Fog is not an interruption. It is part of the landscape. Acceptance changes how uncertainty feels. It becomes something to navigate patiently, moment by moment. What does stability mean in a place divided by islands and shifting skies? It isn't the land. It is simply the ability to continue moving forward, even when you cannot see the path. The fog doesn't just drift, it orchestrates. One moment the world is erased, the next, it returns in fractured beauty, a sudden cliffside, a ribbon of road, then silence. Driving here isn't travel. It's moving through a memory that rewrites itself. You've arrived in a place where visibility is a luxury and certainty is temporary. But there is no chaos here. There is only structure. You'll notice it in the locals. They drive with a deliberate, rhythmic caution. Conversations pause when the weather shifts. Doors aren't just opened. They are checked. This isn't fear. It's a learned, respectful dance with an environment that refuses to be tamed. As the mist thins, the landscape reveals itself with intentionality. Green slopes, stone fences, and homes tucked into valleys as if placed by hand. There is no sprawl, only containment. Everything feels considered. The wind is a constant, invisible companion, moving through villages to remind us who is truly in charge. Then, the ocean. It doesn't frame the land, it consumes it. The dark water merges with the sky, erasing the boundary between earth and horizon. Here, separation is an illusion. The wind shapes the waves shape the cliffs, and the cliffs shape the people. It's a closed-loop existence, and it changes you. In these villages, anonymity dies. People wave not out of obligation, but recognition. You are part of the story the moment you cross the border. It begs a question every traveler eventually faces. Does this forced connectivity mean freedom or isolation? As you pull over to watch the sheep grazing on impossible inclines, realize there is no urgency here. Geography and weather set the boundaries, and life finds its balance within them. Silence isn't empty, it's the architecture of the place. It forces you to stop looking at the world and start listening to it. The fog begins to return, curling around the cliffs like breath. As you head back into the shifting light, you're left with a lingering, haunting thought. If you leave, will this profound sense of presence follow you? Or does it vanish the moment the wind stops touching your skin? The road continues. The answer is still waiting. The ferry ride isn't travel, it's suspension. You are caught in a moment where the world simplifies into just three elements: water, wind, and motion. Beneath your feet, the engine hums, but above deck, the horizon is a shapeshifter. The ocean here doesn't just exist, it expands, reminding you exactly how small the land really is. From the water, these islands look less like destinations and more like brief green interruptions in an endless blue. Watching them flicker in and out of the mist, your definition of home begins to tilt. It stops being a fixed point on a map and starts feeling like a state of motion, a cycle of leaving and returning. Inside the cabin, the silence is heavy, not with absence but with agreement. It's an unspoken pact between the people and the place. We don't need to fill this space. We just need to live with it. As we dock, the transition is seamless. Water becomes land, motion becomes arrival. Each island carries its own heartbeat, its own weather, and its own quiet identity, forged not by geography alone, but by the relentless rhythm of return. People here don't just disappear into the world. They gravitate back, realizing that distance is just another way to change your perception. Driving inland, the road climbs and the landscape tightens. The wind returns, a fundamental part of the world, as if the island wouldn't feel complete without that constant bracing pressure. In the villages, life is lived with a deliberate contextual awareness. Nothing is automatic. When the weather can rewrite the day in minutes, you learn to pay attention. You realize that even silence here is data. It's information that defines how you move through your day. As the road opens into a wide, stillness-drenched valley, the question shifts from survival to belonging. What does it mean to belong to a land that constantly reminds you of its power? It isn't something you claim, it's something you survive and accept. The people here don't talk about the landscape as scenery, they talk about it as structure. This removes the distance between human life and the earth, turning geography into identity. As you pull over near a cliffside, the wind pushes hard against the car, a reminder that stillness here is just a temporary arrangement. You look out at the dark, restless water meeting the sky, and you're left with the ultimate traveler's puzzle. If your identity is shaped by the force of what you must adapt to, who are you when that adaptation becomes your natural state? The question doesn't resolve. It just travels with you, crossing the wind and the water, lingering long after the islands have faded from view. The road vanishes. Not into mist, but into solid, unforgiving rock. A dark, jagged opening is carved deep into the mountainside. It feels less like a simple tunnel and more like an entrance into a forbidden, hidden world. You instinctively tap the brakes. Something about this passage feels intentionally guarded. Yet a steady, casual stream of cars flows inside without a second thought. You follow, and the moment you enter, Daylight snaps shut behind you. The world instantly compresses into cold stone walls and a narrow, winding strip of asphalt. Your headlights stretch forward, struggling to define a space that fundamentally refuses to be known. This is infrastructure pushed to its absolute harrowing limit. Not built around the landscape, but forced directly through the heart of it. Welcome to the Faroe Islands, where distance isn't measured in standard kilometers. It's measured in transitions. In most parts of the world, a tunnel is an engineering exception. Here, it is pure survival. These tunnels replace fragile bridges that would be obliterated by North Atlantic storms and roads that would be impossible to cling to against the sheer vertical cliffs. Some even plunge deep beneath the freezing, crushing weight of the ocean. When you're driving here, you aren't just commuting. You're navigating a massive sub-oceanic web designed to defy the elements. After what feels like an eternity in the suffocating dark, the light reappears. You emerge not just into a new valley, but onto an entirely different island. It features different jagged cliffs, a different kind of silence, yet it is all part of the same seamless, interconnected system. It's easy for us as visitors to romanticize this, but watch the locals. To them, this isn't a geological marvel, it's a routine commute. Daily life, work, school, shopping, family visits flows through these mountains as casually as traffic on a bustling highway in a major metropolis. That normalization? That is exactly what makes it so extraordinary. They have turned the seemingly impossible into a mundane, everyday Tuesday. As you emerge into a small town, you see the real beauty. A modern society that doesn't try to dominate nature, but chooses to cooperate with it. Buildings are nestled, not sprawling. Redundancy is low, because in a place this remote, failure isn't just an inconvenience, it's total isolation. There's a subtle shift in the air. The clouds darken, the wind picks up, and almost instantly, the town adjusts. Doors close, movement slows, and the vibe changes without a single word being spoken. It's a collective, intuitive awareness. When you live in the margins of the map, you don't just watch the weather. You live in constant, rhythmic conversation with it. This changes how you relate to the world. Everything here feels closer, more connected. The space feels smaller, not physically, but perceptually. You realize that remote is a fluid concept. It isn't about how many miles you are from a city. It's about how much you are forced to engage with your environment. As you stand on the edge of a cliff, looking out over that vast, indifferent ocean, the ultimate question hits you. If we can build a modern, connected life inside the harshest rock and beneath the deepest seas, then what exactly does isolated even mean anymore? Maybe it's not about the distance. Maybe it's about the silence you are finally willing to listen to. The wind hits you again. Hard. Then stops. Then hits again. Nothing here stays consistent for long. Not even silence. This is the edge. But forget everything you think that means. Because the first lie is this: it is not isolated. It only looks isolated. Pause that thought. Look down. A village sits beneath the cliffs, tiny, still, almost frozen. But here's the twist. People are inside those homes right now, cooking, talking, living completely normal lives in one of the most extreme landscapes on Earth. Now ask yourself, how is that even possible? Look left, ocean, endless, unbroken. Look right, cliffs, sharp enough to cut the sky. And between them, human life, barely holding space. But here's where it gets weird. Nothing here is actually far. Because of this, tunnels, roads that go under mountains and under the ocean. You are sitting above thousands of meters of water, while someone is casually driving to buy groceries. Now switch perspective. Imagine living here. Weather check, mandatory. In 5 minutes, sun, fog, storm, whiteout. No warning, no negotiation, just change. Most people leave, but 50,000 don't. Why? We're getting there. Look at the sheep. Yes, sheep. They act like they own the place, because honestly, they kind of do. Zoom out. This entire land is not controlled by humans, it's shared. Between wind, water, rock, and people, and that balance is fragile. Now quick shift. You're inside a tunnel. Dark, no exit in sight. Above you, ocean, literally. Thousands of tons of it pressing down. And yet, you're listening to music. Someone else is thinking about dinner. Normal life, under the sea. Everything here is connected, not by bridges, but by underground roads. Mountains gone, distance compressed, isolation almost an illusion. But even with tunnels, it still feels far. Why? Because weather controls access. Always weather. Now rapid fire reality check. Internet, schools, hospitals, infrastructure. This is not a primitive place. It is highly engineered, but nature still wins, always. Now hit the emotional core. Why stay here? Not for comfort, not for convenience, not for escape. It's for identity. Because here, the land doesn't decorate life, it defines it. Final escalation. Imagine leaving, moving to a city, no wind, no cliffs. Would it still feel like you? Or would something feel missing, or without you even knowing what it is? Last shot, cliff edge, ocean below, a village glowing in the distance. Maybe this was never the edge of the world. Maybe Maybe it's just where the world slows down enough for you to notice it properly.